Thanks, Alex. I get into a lot of trouble in a room with actual real designers when people call me a designer. So just a good caveat that I happen to make stuff. I'm not a trained designer. So in case anyone has a go at me, but it's really great to be. I don't spend enough time in Edinburgh. I used to work for the Edinburgh Festivals actually for a couple of years, and was here all the time. And it's really lovely to be back and lovely to be here in such a busy room. And may our natural body heat raise the temperature, therefore. So. Yeah, so when I recently I've been doing quite a lot of talking actually, and when have been doing recent talks, I've been mainly talking about modern mindfulness, mindfulness in a 21st century, the relation between technology and mental well-being, and all the sort of themes, mainly around the sort of stuff that's in the book that I've just written. And here's some pictures of the kind of things that I make. There's Buddhify. We made a physical product called Cards for Mindfulness. We've got a new app coming out on Tuesday called Sleepfulness. But rather than talking about the products and talking about the theme of mindfulness itself in the sort of the broader context, and as I'm currently just doing as a stump speech at the moment, I want to do something a little bit different. And I think the opportunity that Alex afforded and Creative Mornings afforded through the theme of ethics is a really exciting one and really interested me. So I hope you'll, if you do, it would be really great. Actually, if you actually really dislike my talk and get really angry, that's actually great for keeping warm. So I'll try to do a bit of that for some of you. So ethics. Ethics is a really interesting word for me. So whilst all the stuff that we make as a company are very much for a general audience, and I'm a Buddhist, right? So I train in the Buddhist tradition, and the ethics is a really important word in the Buddhist tradition, for a simple reason is that whilst they're like literally like hundreds and thousands of different styles of Buddhist practice, one thing sort of unites them all, and sort of one of the things that unites them all is how Buddhists talk about the Buddhist training. The Buddhist training is typically talked as a threefold training. And those three aspects, one of them is ethics. There's ethics, wisdom, and stability of mind. These are all the things that one trains in explicitly. So that's why ethics is really important. Interesting to me is that it's something that is part of my practice. But when, over time, the more and more you get into the sort of meditation thing and mindfulness, and if you go down the sort of more Buddhist bit as well, especially, the more you realize that all these things sort of muddle together and mush up together. And they're not really the same thing. Like Buddhists love interdependence, it's like one of our favorite things. And so this idea of ethics isn't independent from wisdom, isn't independent from having a really stable mind, and so on. And importantly, well, when you first get into when people first get into mindfulness, just sort of general pop mindfulness, they get into it for one of two reasons: crisis and curiosity. And of all the people that I've spoken to who get into mindfulness, I'd say 80 to 90% of them do it because of crisis, because of bereavement or a breakup or a breakdown or just work stress or whatever it is, right? There's a bit of pain in their lives, and they look for something they look inside for something to resolve that or to support them in that. And so one starts off this mindfulness thing focused on oneself. You try to solve your own problem, but then as you get more and more into it, and should your interest grow, you realize that you can only but include other parts of your life. You can't. You have to include your relationships. You have to include your work. You have to include your business decisions. You have to include your relationship to your family, to your partner, to the people at the bus stop. All of this stuff becomes part of your practice, which originally started off as very much a sort of an individual thing that was just for me, suddenly becomes a much broader thing. And that's definitely my experience. I know it's the experience of most people who sort of who do this over a number of years. And what that means is that although the products we make as a company are all about mindfulness, the whole way we approach making work and the way we approach our organization and just how we think about things is part of my practice. So I wanted to sort of share a bit of that. So it's quite rare for me at the moment to be in a room of people who are makers of various types and designers and creators and entrepreneurs. And so I wanted to sort of share some of the process and the decisions that I make. Because for me, ethics is effectively like I try to think of like what like the definite how I define ethics, and for me, it just came to this combination of ethics, wisdom, and stability of mind. So knowing what is the wise thing to do. So trusting that you have stability of mind, and then doing the wise thing. So when doing the wise thing, when making decisions, we all make decisions as part of our work. Creative decisions, organizational decisions, client decisions, whatever. Which bit of collaboration software to use. And we weigh up different things when making those decisions. And when I've made the most difficult, I like stuff like stuff. People have this sort of phrase that what are the things that people often ask me, like, what are the things that keep me up at night? I actually sleep really well, so not too many things. I have a 10-week-old son actually, so he's the main thing keeping me up at night. But the thing, if I were to be kept up at night by decisions, the four things that I'm weighing up tend to be the same things. They're the commercial success of my company, the well-being of myself and the people I work with, the well-being of the people that use the products, and then this thing which I've called authenticity, which isn't this sort of just wanky sort of coaching thing of like, oh, just being true to yourself. I mean something quite specific. I mean authenticity to the mindfulness tradition in which I consider myself to be part of. So mindfulness is I'm loath to call it an industry because it's too mature for that, but it's an area which has got a lot of attention and momentum at the moment, and there are people who, as a market, it's growing on the consumer side, on the corporate side, in all sorts of different use case, and there are definitely companies and people who are making products out there who sort of discovered mindfulness, seen that it's a hot trend, and have a lot of maybe entrepreneurial skill and deploy that in this new area. For me, like that's sort of okay, but for me, the products we make have to have a level of authenticity and understanding and deep sort of experience of mindfulness, and we try to express that in a way that is accessible, but can be clearly. So I can stand face to face with a long-term, like a mindfulness teacher, my hero mindfulness teachers around the world, and explain my products, and they would recognize the products that I make as being authentic, and that's really, really important to me. So these are the things so in the decisions I'm going to talk through, I'll explain. These are the things that I've been weighing up. So it might be worth keeping those in mind. So to the four things, I'm going to start with something which seems quite ordinary. So app pricing. Some of you in the room will have enjoyed the joys of pricing one's own app. It's a weird thing. The economics of the App Store is insane in a way. And so some of you might recognize this screen. For those of you who don't, this is when you publish an app on iOS, you do it through a thing called iTunes Connect, which is an interestingly designed bit of software, but that's by the by. So this is the screen where you decide how much your app's going to cost. And this is the screen for Budify. And there are a number of different options available to you, as you'll know as a consumer or as a publisher yourself. So it can be free. It can be free with in-app purchase. It can be free with subscriptions as a sort of subset of in-app purchase. And then it can be paid, and it can be paid with in-app purchase. So you've got all these different options available to you. Now, Broodify is a weird app in that it's priced at £3.99 with no in-app purchase. And this is like a total outlier. Um, it, I don't know what the latest statistic is, but like if you think of um, the I think pretty much sort of if you look at the top grossing and the most successful financial apps on the App Store across any category, you'll most typically find them they'll be free with in-app purchase. Typically free with what's called consumable in-app purchase, which means that the purchases that you make run out, so you have to keep on buying them. I'm looking at you, Clash of Clans. So and so when we were deciding to price Spotify, we had to think, okay, what's the best thing to do? And we wanted it wasn't going to be just purely free. That was so that was taken out. This is a commercial product. I'd spent a lot of my own money on it, and so I wanted to recoup that. So that wasn't an option. Free with in-app purchase. One of my main problems with free with in-app purchase is that you're hiding value. So those of you who know the Broodify wheel, there's all these different sections, 16 sections of categories of content that apply to different parts of your life. So working, going to bed, walking around town, eating, whatever, feeling stressed, all these different activities. If I'd done free in-app purchase, I would have had to hide some of those sections. And basically said, here's a partial experience, which is a good experience, but to really have the great experience, you have to pay some money. And the whole point of Broodify was that the user could experience whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, that matched their need. And so forcing them to go through a payment hurdle would have given them a really, really poor experience and actually be fundamentally wrong to the point of the app. So that decision around in-app purchase just didn't make was absolutely where the market was, but we decided not to do that because we didn't want to hide anything, and that was not a straightforward decision. Broodify's main competitors, if you like, in a way they're competitors, are two main products, which will be some of you are familiar with, one called Headspace, which is the dominant product in the mindfulness market, and one called Calm.com. And they both work on the free with subscription model. Now, and it works very well for them. They're very successful companies and they're good products, and I like the people that run those companies, so I have zero beef with Headspace and Calm, but I have beef with subscription model for mindfulness apps. And the reason for that is, again, it's coming back to this thing around what is the wise thing to do? The right thing to do from a startup perspective is free with subscription because it's recurring revenue. You give people enough of a bit of content for a taste, and then you back yourself that people will invest in the whatever it is, $5 to $10 a month. And you just do the best you can to make sure that the percentage conversion of that is as good as possible. And Headspace and Calm do a great job on that. But the problem I have with subscription model with regards to the wise thing to do is, what does it do to the user experience? So my criticism of subscription model is that it creates dependencies in the user. And this is really problematic for me. So when you have an app like Broodify, you get loads of great analytics packages built into the back of the app, and so you can see how people are using it. And we do it all anonymously, but we look at all the patterns of usage. And what we find is that people are using the same bit of content and again and again and again, like over days, weeks, months, and years. And this was a real surprise to me, actually, because the reason I designed Broodify originally, my intention was that someone picks it up, tries some different sections, finds 4 or 5 techniques that they like, and then they drop the app. That's the reason I made it, was that they learn the techniques that really work for them, and then they learn them enough so that they understand them, and then they can integrate them to their lives without the need to turn on the app and listen to the headphones to do that. Because what I want to create, what the vision I want is people who are independent mindfulness practitioners, who understand technique, who have some skills, and then don't need the support of an app to go on and make it real in their lives. I don't want people to rely on apps for calm, kindness, concentration, self-awareness. I want apps to give people the initial inspiration and technical skill to go on and develop those capacities, but then be able to then let go of the app to do that. In a way, sort of thinking of a mindfulness app as being like sort of stabilizers on a bicycle. The problem is subscription models keep the stabilizers on. So like Bradley Wiggins is never going to win Tour de France like with stabilizers, but like great people who have great understanding of self-awareness, you get there by yourself. Initially, you need some support, but you will need guidance all the way through to some extent, some coaching and so on. But the importance of independence is really important, and I think it's an unfortunate unintended consequence of subscription models that they encourage dependence, and that's a problem. I consider that a big one of the current problems of the mindfulness marketplace at the moment is that we're creating a generation. We, as I take responsibility as within this, like as the entrepreneurs in the space, we're creating a generation of people who can only use who become dependent on apps for well-being rather than being dependent on themselves, and that's I worry about that. So that was decision one that I wanted to talk through. Saying that, as a caveat, our second app, Sleepfulness, which comes out next week, is free with in-app purchase, because like it's a different product, but also it like the downside, because the number one on that list is commercial success, and when you have a $5 product on the market, no one buys it. Well, a lot of people do buy it, but you miss out on the 99% of people who say, well, the free thing is going to be better. Like, why am I bothering with the $5 thing when I can buy the free thing, when I can get the free thing, and then the free thing hooks you up? We spent a lot of time trying to work out, and so Sleepfulness is an experiment in free within app, and I don't think it's the best solution, but for me, free within app is much better than free with subscription. Because you're definitely giving people, especially if that in-app purchase is non-consumable, in the sense that when you buy it, you get it forever, and it doesn't run out. So it's not these are all difficult decisions to make, right? Like everything we know that they're difficult things that I like sleepfulness. There are things that you have to weigh up all these different things. So that's. App pricing is not straightforward. The second thing that's not straightforward is when your members of a team go AWOL. So this was actually a relatively sort of a small episode that happened a couple of years ago, and I think it's instructive as to it's helped us really understand and think about the company as a whole. So we're working on a new version of Buddhify, and one of the team members who was holding an important part of the product disappeared. They weren't working in the UK, so they were based elsewhere remotely, and just completely lost contact with them. It got to the point where I was sort of finding people I sort of knew who lived near them, and then finding their address on the invoices and sort of trying to get them to knock on the door. It was sort of got to that point where I just really needed this bit of content, and because what was happening was that the bit of content was on the critical path of the app, and it was delaying publication. We were running out of time. And so it was becoming a problem, but it was strange because the relationship with this particular person was really great before this happened, and it just felt really strange. But it was very it was a total disappearance. And I was using, like I said, using all these sort of really strange tactics and tactics I didn't really want, but the tactics that I felt I had to get there. Um, and but we had a decision to make, and the decision was, do we just drop this person, and then we could have got what the type of content it was for, we could have got it elsewhere, and yeah, it would have cost a bit more, but then I wouldn't have paid the guy for the bit that he hadn't done anyway. So it wouldn't materially, the financial cost wasn't too high, and spent a lot of time thinking about this and decided to just wait. It sounds a bit like some people, when I've told this story before, will just say, like, because this materially delayed the publication of Buddhify. And no one would know that, in the sense that, like, we had to, like, when you're publishing an app, you have everything lined up. You've got PR stuff, you've got graphic assets, you've got marketing campaigns, you've got this all the sort of other, like, post publication stuff. And so we had to sort of delay all of that stuff and move all the timelines, whilst I basically waited for one guy to show up and return an email. And the delay was probably about 2 to 3 months, maybe, and I can't remember the exact time. And what happened was, so eventually he did turn up. We published the app. We got all the content. The quality was great. We got all the content and published it. And then about a couple of months after publication, being heckled by a dog, I think. That's a first. The guy got in touch with me and said, look, can we just have a Skype and talk about what happened? And what had happened was that his brother had died. And so he'd had this really difficult experience. And he was really embarrassed because he knew that the work was delayed, he knew his material to the project, but he was really embarrassed he was in a situation where this big thing was happening in his life, he was having a difficult time, and he wasn't being able to deliver his professional commitments, and it just all got sort of caught up, and he wasn't able to deal with it. And we had a really long, important conversation about that experience, and just got it all out. And that experience was really important because it made me think about supply chain. So, which might sound weird, but it made me think about if we're making well-being products and the people who are making those products are not having a good time, is that okay? It made me think about the supply chain of someone receiving Buddhify. What can we do as a company to optimize every moment in the product design experience of every supplier, everyone who writes content, does audio, does the editing, does the coding, does the UX? Can a user receive a product which is in service of their happiness, which has been completely, to the best of our ability, we can say that people have been happy whilst they've been making it. And that's a sort of a ridiculous, like, it's incredibly idealistic, but I think it's also an ideal that I aspire to. And so that experience with the delay on that product led me to really think about and realize that. So made me think a lot more about team well-being and making sure that team well-being was as important a metric of our company's success as sales or press coverage or partnership value and all that sort of stuff. And that wouldn't have happened unless, so Buddhify was delayed, but the result has been us recognizing this important fact of end-to-end well-being supply chain. I don't know, it's a stupid term, but I don't know, I should probably come up with a fancy name for it. But it's a thing that is really important to me. The third decision I had to make was probably about a year, 18 months ago. This took a long time, which is everyone loves just everyone sort of is obsessed with this whole West Coast VC-backed startup thing, right? Um, the sort of the glamour of the unicorn company, and we talk about like places not very far away from this building talk about this thing quite a lot, um, and uh, and it's really attractive. It's really attractive. Like when like Brudify is still Brudify is a bit weird, and like so yeah, our main competitors at the moment are West Coast backed US based VC backed companies with lots of money, um, and the uh, as mindfulness as a market has been growing, and as a sort of entirely self-funded company with a product which is sort of best in or almost best in category, we've had a decent amount of interest from people with lots of money. And it's very like it's really like attractive, and it's really difficult to see clearly during those situations where people are sort of talking about how quickly you can grow and what you could do and the sort of numbers you could reach and the kind of product you could make and the resources you can draw on. And I had to make a decision around what kind of company I wanted to make and wanted to build. Um, and I'm sure, I'm absolutely sure that in the future, I'm not ruling out in the future that we will take on some money, and that might happen. There might be some in the future that might be the most appropriate thing to do. But yes, it was a painful decision. That was right. So, uh, but the decision we decided to make was actually just stay indie, and so the kind of companies that I am most inspired by are indie game companies rather than sexy office VC-backed startups. So that's what we set us. What's how we've set ourselves up as sort of like as a indie mindfulness product studio, and and that dictated our strategy. So our strategy is effectively we'll put out at least two products a year, one of which is very commercially focused and market led, and one of which is very creatively focused and innovation led, if that's not too stupid a phrase. And um, that, and because not only is that not only does it mean we can maintain our authenticity and create products that are the products we want to make and that we feel fit within the mindfulness space the best. It also allows us to evolve the mindfulness industry, because a lot of the stuff that we make, if not all of it, is in response to the fact that we dislike the limitations of so much of stuff that's all that there. The reason I wrote a mindfulness book was not just to write another mindfulness book. There's enough of those out there. I wrote a mindfulness book because a lot of the mindfulness books out there all say the same thing. So I wanted to make something that said something different. The reason I made Buddhify originally was that I looked at the App Store in 2011 and was like, these all look the same and they all have rubbish design and they all have lotus flowers in their identity, and it's like no one's ever sort of even thought about design from a user perspective before, and so that's why we made Buddhify, and so staying small allows us to do that, and it does limit us in our level of resources and so on, but it means that we're able to make the work that we want to make, and also perhaps most importantly or as importantly is that remember, like if you're putting well-being into your business plan, if you're making sure that the well-being of your team is as important as everything else, then staying small is a good way of doing that, and staying independent is a good way of doing that. Because when you take on other people's money, then you take other people's perspectives and demands as well. And the final thing I want to talk about, the final decision I want to talk about, is one I actually haven't made yet because I don't know what to do. So this is sort of like me asking for help. This is a plea for help, as they say. So when you make a mindfulness app, something weird, like I didn't really think about it at the beginning of how intimate an experience this was. So you're literally, so Buddhify guided audio, in particular, a guided audio product related to mindfulness, because not all of our stuff is guided audio. So you're literally in someone's head. You're literally telling them where to place their attention. It doesn't get any more intimate than that. And I didn't really understand that until I started to get emails and responses and stuff after publication of our first prototype. I just want to share a bit of an email I got from someone, just to show you how brutal and stark this can be. And I don't know what to do with that. I don't know, like, what is the right thing to do when you're in someone's life, when you've made something that is in this. Like, well, I don't know, and it's really difficult to know whether you should, because historically there'll be someone there to help people, a counselor, a friend, but if what they're turning to you is an app you made, what's your responsibility in that? It's something that I think about a lot, and I don't know. So yeah, like one of the things to recognize that I've learned a lot is that when weighing up all these things, you don't know for sure what the right thing to do. Maybe the right thing for me to do is not make stuff that is intimate. But then I also know that it helps a lot of people. But then I also know that maybe the ones that it's helpful for are the ones who write to me, and the ones who don't write to me, what's their experience? I'll never know. So it's a really difficult and challenging space to be in. But you sort of, yeah, it's difficult. So that was that.
Possible to create products which do help people and aren't actually.
Yeah, I think like generally this whole area of well-being and technologies and product, particularly mental well-being, I'm like, well, I'm by definition I'm optimistic about it, like because I've placed a massive bet on it being a thing. Like I've and I am optimistic. I think we're becoming more. We can only become more sophisticated. If you think about one of the reasons, like if you think about physical health and technology, and how I sort of a really important moment was like from the Nintendo Wii onwards, up to Apple Watch, we've seen the growth of technologies that have now become quite normalized. So Runkeeper, whatever Fitbit, whatever your thing of choice is. Zombies Run, all these things are products which are people using their devices to support their physical health. And for me, the next space to go is mental health, and mindfulness is one part of that. So it's just part of a broader movement. But I think there's definitely like the sort of the popular narrative is definitely that technologies are damaging our well-being due to distraction and attention spans and so on. But it doesn't have to be that way. We're just very much in the infancy of this stuff. So I'm sort of proud to be part of a community of people and companies who are working in this space that are showing that technologies can be, like anyone who here who's a gamer, right? Like in the last 5 years, the growth of games which use emotional narrative to drive through like is remarkable. And like but you could just say, oh, gaming is all about like, they just look at GTA 5 and they look at Call of Duty and go, that's what games is like. And I think we're still a bit in that, which is incredibly crude analysis of of a really diverse industry. And I think we're currently still quite crude in that, saying, "Oh, technology is bad for us." It's like that's such a just using the word technology as a thing is a ridiculous statement. So, like, so I think that I'm optimistic about it for sure.
Okay, awesome. Do you have any questions for the crowd?
You said that being in someone's mind is quite important and something that you didn't think about when you first brought it out. Now that you know
Mm.
it, how is that affecting future applications and design process?
Yeah, great. So, question about like how's that reflecting on being the intimacy and changing product design? So, it is a lot. So, uh, the one thing. So I talked about an unintended consequence of mindfulness apps is that we're becoming dependent on them. Another unintended consequence of mindfulness apps is that of the success of mindfulness apps is that we're training people to meditate only by themselves. So you plug in headphones, you do your thing, but it's just you by yourself. But historically, whether it's mindfulness practice or well-being in general, that's always been about other people, right? But we're creating these experiences which are isolated experiences of individual people. And so the products that we're designing literally right now are ones which encourage well-being as a social experience rather than so that when people are exploring this stuff there is another person there, so you're not just there by yourself. So that is the practical way we're doing it at the moment. um, the other way, like uh, and the 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 other things around making sure that the user feels that they have some power in this relationship. Because like, it's little bit technical, but I think that there's a danger of when you're using a product that you give power to the product. The product is going to save me. There's a cool meditation teacher he's gonna give me advice, and I just happen to be there. But whether it's the way you write content or the way you design interfaces, all of these different aspects of product design, how do you actually encourage the user to feel that it's there and they're the ones leading their experience? So people always go, "Oh, but if I really help me out," and like I always sort of I always respond saying like, "You did the work, but if I just happen to be there." And I think that shift around and they're making that really explicit, that people really know these are my capacities that I'm developing, and so that they have confidence in themselves, and that's another important thing.
Have you received any negative feedback, and if so, what have you done to adapt to that?
The negative feedback has been we receive negative feedback, obviously. It exclusively tends to be technical. It tends to be like, "I hate that guy's voice," this guy's voice. Um, uh, so um, yeah, there's lots of technical things there's lots of things like technically we've done wrong. We often receive negative criticism, theoretic negative criticism, like using an app for a thing like meditation is intrinsically evil, is the kind of thing that we receive. And then I sort of say, "Have you used the product?" And then they say no. And I say, "Well, use the product, and then let's have a conversation." And I think this is one of the things. So if you look at reviews I think this is actually quite an important problem for this whole space, which is if you look at App Store reviews, all the positive ones are, "It was great, it really helped me." All the negative ones are, "I hate the design. Why is the font so small?" Blah, blah, stuff like that. Which means that we're actually not getting the negative feedback about the the content experience. I'm actually, I'm concerned that I don't think it's not there. I just don't think it's coming to us, because that's sort of those as an app user to an app publisher, there are very few forums of conversation there. App stores are one way. Well, Google Play, you can sort of talk to the user, but the iOS App Store is awful for interaction. And people are now trained to not expect anyone to respond to stuff. So we respond to everyone eventually who writes into us. And the first thing people say is, "Oh, I'm just so pleased I got a reply." And like, so I think there's a problem there. So like, yeah, like I wish we had more negative feedback, to be honest, which sounds stupid, but now now I'm actually well trained in not taking it personally. At the beginning, it was be like, "Oh my god, they hate my app," but then, yeah.